Our neighbors seemed like the perfect family, the kind of people you'd see in a soap commercial, all white teeth and golden retriever energy, their lawn the greenest patch on the entire street, almost unnaturally vibrant like astroturf, but real, meticulously trimmed every Saturday morning at exactly 7 a.m. The smell of Mrs. Miller's chocolate chip cookies would drift through her kitchen window every Wednesday afternoon. That warm vanilla sugar scent that made my mother sigh with envy, and Mr. Miller would wave from his Tesla with that broad smile, the kind that showed too many teeth, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. But perfection is just another word for camouflage, a carefully painted facade hiding right underneath. And I learned this truth at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October when I woke to the sound of a shovel biting into earth, metal scraping against something hard, rhythmic and deliberate like a heartbeat. And when I looked out my bedroom window, I saw him, Mr. Miller, in his driveway under the flickering sodium glow of our faulty streetlight, digging, his breath forming white clouds in the cold autumn air. And beside him on the concrete lay something wrapped in blue plastic tarp, something long and heavy and unmistakably human-shaped. The perfect life next door wasn't a dream, it was a tomb, and I was the only one who knew. The Millers moved in 3 years ago on a bright May morning. Their moving truck pristine white without a single dent or scratch. And I remember thinking even then that something felt staged about it, choreographed like a rehearsed play. Mrs. Miller wore a sundress the color of daffodils, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that swung with manufactured enthusiasm as she directed the movers, while Mr. Miller carried a single-potted orchid up the front steps as if this delicate flower was the most precious cargo in the truck. Within a week, their house, transformed from the faded beige eyesore it had been under the previous owner into a gleaming monument to suburban aspiration. Fresh white paint that seemed to glow in sunlight, black shutters sharp as knife edges, a front door the color of arterial blood with a brass knocker polish to mirror shine. Every morning at 6 a.m. Mrs. Miller would emerge in her yoga pants and do sun salutations on their front lawn, her movements fluid and precise. And at 6:30 Mr. Miller would jog past our house with their golden retriever Max, both moving in perfect sync like they'd trained together for years. My parents loved them immediately, my mother constantly comparing our overgrown garden to their Japanese maple and geometrically arranged rose bushes, my father admiring Mr. Miller's Tesla and his vague but impressive job title, something about consulting in tech startups. And every neighborhood barbecue became a performance where the Millers played the role of the family everyone wanted to be. But I felt it from the beginning, that cold vibration that ran up my spine whenever Mr. Miller's gaze landed on me, his smile never changing, his eyes flat and reflective like a shark's, and Mrs. Miller's laughter always half a second too late, as if she had to remember that laughing was something humans did. They existed in the uncanny valley between real and replica, and I was the only one who noticed. The anomaly started small, easy to dismiss as paranoia or imagination. It began with sounds in the night, a high-pitched whine that seemed to come through the heating vent around 2 a.m., not quite mechanical, but not quite organic either. Something between a power drill and a scream filtered through water. And when I mentioned it to my parents, they said I was hearing the old pipes settling or maybe a neighbor's TV left on too loud. Then came the deliveries, unmarked white vans pulling into their driveway at odd hours, 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, 11 p.m. on a Saturday. Men in plain clothes unloading heavy black plastic barrels the size of oil drums. No labels, no logos, just smooth, featureless cylinders that they rolled down a ramp into the Miller's garage while Mr. Miller stood watching with his arms crossed, and once I saw Mrs. Miller peek through the curtains during one of these deliveries, her face pressed against the glass, and for just a moment the mask slipped. Her expression was pure terror, eyes wide and wet, mouth slightly open in a silent scream. Every muscle in her face frozen in an architecture of fear, And then she noticed me watching from my window, and the smile snapped back into place so fast. It was like watching a computer reboot, artificial and instant, and she waved at me with that same cheerful energy and disappeared back into the house. I started keeping a notebook, documenting everything, the delivery times, the sounds, the moments when their performance faltered, like when I saw Mr. Miller standing motionless in his backyard at midnight staring up at the stars without blinking for 11 minutes straight. I timed it. Or when their dog Max suddenly refused to enter their house and had to be dragged inside whimpering and scratching at the doorframe. Or the afternoon I saw Mrs. Miller washing red stains off their garage floor with a garden hose, scrubbing frantically even though from my angle it looked like the concrete was already clean. The cracks were spreading, and I was starting to see what lay beneath. The storm hit on October 13th, a Tuesday night when the power grid gave out at 9:47 p.m., plunging our entire street into darkness except for the occasional lightning flash that turned the world stark white and black. No grays, just absolutes. I was reading by flashlight when I heard it, that same metallic scraping sound that had woken me weeks before, and I went to my window and looked out at the Miller house, which sat in perfect darkness. No candles, no flashlights, nothing. Lightning cracked the sky open, and in that brief stuttering illumination, I saw their basement window, usually covered by curtains, now exposed because the power outage had disabled whatever automated system kept them closed. And in that window, I saw a room that shouldn't exist, walls lined with plastic sheeting that reflected the lightning like wet skin. A stainless steel table in the center bolted to the floor with restraints at each corner. And hanging from the ceiling on hooks were tools, saws and drills, and things I couldn't identify, all arranged with surgical precision. And standing in the middle of this room was Mr. Miller, holding something long and curved that gleamed even in the darkness. And on the table was a shape, a person, strapped down and motionless. And Mrs. Miller stood in the corner with her hands over her mouth. Not crying, not screaming, just standing there in absolute stillness like a mannequin. The lightning faded and the darkness swallowed the scene, but the image was burned into my retinas. And I understood then that the Millers weren't just hiding something. They were something, and this basement was the heart of it. The place where the performance ended and the truth lived in stainless steel and plastic sheeting. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window watching their house, waiting for movement, waiting for anything. And at 3:17 a.m., Mr. Miller emerged from his garage with a shovel and that blue tarp and began digging in the garden beside their rose bushes, methodical and calm like he'd done this 100 times before. I tried to tell someone. I went to my parents the next morning and described what I'd seen, but they looked at me with that particular brand of parental concern that means they think you're being dramatic. My mother said, I probably saw them doing home renovations, and my father suggested I'd been watching too many horror movies. And when I insisted we call the police, my mother actually laughed and said the Millers were pillars of the community, and I was letting my imagination run wild. But it was worse than disbelief, because that afternoon Mr. Miller knocked on our door with a plate of Mrs. Miller's famous cookies, still warm, and he chatted with my parents about the storm damage and neighborhood watch meetings. And as he was leaving, he looked directly at me and smiled that shark smile and said, I hope you're sleeping well these days. I know storms can be frightening for young people. And there was a weight in those words, a message wrapped in casual concern. He knew that I had seen, and he was telling me that it didn't matter. I started researching, digging through old newspapers and county records, and I found that the Millers had lived in 3 different states over the past 15 years. Always in nice suburban neighborhoods, always the perfect family. And in each location there had been disappearances, never enough to form a pattern unless you were looking for one. A missing jogger here, a hitchhiker there, people on the margins who wouldn't be missed immediately. And then I found the connection to my own family, a photograph from 1997 showing my Uncle Robert at a county fair. And in the background, slightly out of focus, was a younger Mr. Miller. Same flat eyes, same too wide smile. And my Uncle Robert had disappeared in 1998, his case never solved, written off as a voluntary disappearance because he'd been struggling with depression. The web wasn't just about the Millers, It was about silence, about how easy it is to make people vanish when you wear the right mask, when you bake the right cookies and mow your lawn at the right time and smile with the right number of teeth. And I realized that exposing them wouldn't be enough because the system was designed to protect people like them, to disbelieve people like me. I would have to become something else, something they didn't expect. I stopped being afraid and started being methodical. I studied them the way a predator studies prey, learning their patterns and routines with the precision of someone planning a surgical strike. Mr. Miller left for work every day at 7:45 a.m. and returned at 6:30 p.m. Mrs. Miller went grocery shopping every Thursday at 2 p.m. and attended book club every other Tuesday. Their movements as predictable as clockwork, because predictability was part of their camouflage. I broke into their house on a Thursday afternoon using the spare key they kept under a fake rock in their garden, typical suburban security theater, and I went straight to the basement, my heart hammering so hard I could taste copper, and what I found there was worse than I'd imagined. Not just one room, but three, each serving a different purpose. One for preparation with a steel table and restraints, one for disposal with industrial chemicals and a floor drain, and one that was just storage. Filing cabinets full of photographs and driver's licenses and personal effects, trophies from people who no longer existed. I didn't take anything, I didn't disturb anything. I just photographed everything with my phone, hundreds of images documenting the architecture of their evil. And then I left and replaced the key and went home and began constructing the trap. The genius of it was using their own perfection against them. I created an anonymous email account and sent messages to Mr. Miller's employer attaching photos of the basement. I sent packages to the local news stations containing printed photographs and a flash drive with more evidence. I mailed letters to the FBI Field Office 2 counties over with detailed timelines and GPS coordinates of where I suspected bodies were buried based on satellite imagery of their previous properties. But the masterpiece was the dinner party. I convinced my parents to invite the Millers over for a casual evening meal, just the six of us, including my younger sister. And during dinner, I casually mentioned that I'd been researching our family history and found this interesting photo of Uncle Robert. And I showed them the county fair picture on my phone, watching Mr. Miller's face as he recognized himself in the background. His smile didn't falter, but his left eye twitched once, a microscopic crack in the facade. And I knew I had him. I excused myself and went upstairs and sent one final email from my anonymous account, this time to Mr. Miller's personal address with the subject line, "I saw what you did to my uncle, and now the world will see what you are." The police arrived at the Miller house at 6:42 a.m. on a Friday morning, 18 officers with a warrant, and I watched from my window as they led Mr. and Mrs. Miller out in handcuffs, both still in their pajamas. The performance finally over, and the news vans arrived by 7 a.m., turning our quiet street into a media circus. They found 11 bodies buried in the garden and 3 more in a storage unit they rented across town, the oldest dating back 9 years. And the investigation revealed that Mr. Miller had been a serial killer operating across multiple states for over 2 decades, and Mrs. Miller wasn't a victim, but a willing participant, a partner in every sense of the word. They had built their perfect life as camouflage for their shared pathology. But here's the part that kept me awake for months afterward. When the FBI searched their house, they found my file, a manila folder with my name on it containing photographs of me taken from their windows, notes about my schedule and my habits, and a date circled in red on their calendar 3 weeks in the future, labeled simply RM, my initials. I had been their next project, and by exposing them, I had saved my own life without even knowing I was in danger. The revelation hit me like ice water that I had been living next door to my own death, smiling at it, waving to it, existing in its shadow while it planned the precise moment to strike. The trial was a media sensation, every detail of their crimes dissected and displayed, and I testified about what I'd seen that night during the storm. And when Mr. Miller looked at me from the defendant's table, his smile was finally gone, replaced with something raw and hateful and real, and I felt a strange sense of victory not because of justice, but because I had torn off the mask and forced him to show his true face. They're both serving life sentences without parole in separate maximum security prisons, and our street returned to normal, or what passes for normal after something like that. New neighbors move into the Miller house of family with two young kids who don't know the history. And sometimes I see the mother doing yoga on the front lawn and the father washing his car on Saturday mornings, and they seem nice, perfectly nice, and I wonder. Because here's the thing about monsters, they don't announce themselves with fangs and claws. They announce themselves with cookies and small talk and the greenest lawn on the street. They hide in plain sight wearing the mask of everything we're taught to trust, and once you've seen behind that mask, you can never unsee it. You start noticing the small inconsistencies in everyone. The smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the laugh that comes half a second too late. The perfect life that's just a little too perfect. So I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to think about your neighbors. Really think about them. Do you actually know them, or do you just know the version of themselves they've chosen to show you? Have you ever seen inside their basement? Do you know what they do when the lights go out and the cameras aren't watching? Answer or stay silent. But know this, the Millers weren't unique. They were just the ones that got caught. And somewhere right now, in a quiet suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-maintained lawns, another perfect family is baking cookies and planning their next move. And the only question that matters is whether you'll see them coming before it's too late. Sleep well tonight if you can.